Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 5. This is the For the Fans podcast. My name is Justin Melillo. Alongside, I've got Kevin McAdams. Kevin, good evening. How are you today?
Well, I'm good. Any day that we can do this and right after, only a couple hours after an actual race is kind of cool. Uh, honestly, I'm pretty happy the way the scheduling turned out. Maybe a thing for the future. I know it's not good for the teams, but I honestly enjoyed watching a race at 5 p.m. on a Monday afternoon. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's pretty cool that we get to do this right after a Cup Series race. Normally, we do it the day after or 2 days after, and tonight it's fresh in our minds. So let's use that to our advantage here because we get to talk, like you said, just hours after it took place. So, I mean, the 5 o'clock start time, that's a whole nother discussion because you might have liked it. I personally wasn't too big of a fan, and a lot of the other media members can probably agree with me on that. But we'll
Hmm.
get into that later. There was a lot of racing that went on this weekend in all types of motorsports. All three of the big three NASCAR series were on track this weekend. The Truck Series was in Texas, while the Xfinity and Cup Series were in Michigan. So we'll get into the NASCAR side of our discussion tonight. First up, we got Trucks Ngots at Texas Motor Speedway on Friday night.
It was such a weird race just because it was a wreck fest, but it wasn't because so many guys just spun out. It was really weird, and I don't know if you noticed these trucks have started to become yawed out on the right side. It's really bizarre. I know what they're doing. They're doing it to get side force, but I think it's to the point where they need to start doing something about it, at least in the rules. I think it's starting to impact the balance of the trucks because there's so many wrecks. I think nearly every wreck had something to do with aero. Someone getting to the outside of somebody and just completely sending them around. And that's not the kind of racing I want to watch. I want to watch close racing, and I want them to be able to get close to each other, but they can't. They simply just can't because either they get so close to them and it spins them around, or they get close to them and they lose the run. It's like I don't know. It was cool to see Greg Biffle come back and win, but honestly, it felt like it was just overshadowed by the amount of wrecks that we had. It was just really a really bizarre race.
In 167 laps, they had 13 cautions for 63 laps. So almost, well, actually more than 1/3 of the race was run under caution. They have the percentage on racingreference.info, my favorite website. The percent of the race run under the caution was 37.7%, and the average green flag run was 7.4 laps, and that's kind of sad when you think about it. I mean, these are the third highest NASCAR series running, and yeah, and you got a lot of rookies in there, and you got a lot of inexperienced drivers in there, but it's when you've only got 18 of the 32 trucks running at the end, only 9 of them on the lead lap, and everyone from 19th to 32nd out, most of them from crashing. It's a little bit of a sour look on the series. But yeah, Greg Biffle came back, and the 2000 and what was it, 2000 Truck Series champion.
Yeah.
He's his last win was in 2001. His last Truck Series race was in 2004. His last any race in NASCAR was 2016. Kyle Busch calls him up. Hey, Greg, come run my truck. They run. I think they run dunes together in the desert. Uh,
Hmm.
and Greg was like, "Hell yeah!" He couldn't run the number 69, but he could run the 51. And the 51 was, it's been in victory lane 5 times already this season with Kyle Busch, 5 for 5. Might as well make it 6 for 6 with competent drivers when you put Greg Biffle in there, because he went out there and he stole the show. He really did.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely. I mean, it was definitely a win because of strategy. It wasn't like he was out there dominating. It was most of the race. It seemed like Rhodes and Friesen were up there. Burton a little bit. Chastain would keep coming back and forth through the pack. So I mean, it was definitely a strategy call, but still, it's not a good look for the rest of that team just because. And Kyle said it himself. Like, if you're not winning in his stuff, it's like, what are you doing? I mean, you got Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton's young. Gilliland is young, but Gilliland's been in the series for a while, going on 2 years now, and he really hasn't shown the speed. Harrison, once again, he's just now starting. But I mean, these trucks that they have are just on rails. And I know Gilliland wrecked in the truck series on Friday, and it's hard to really blame him because, like I said, these trucks are just they're yawed out, and he just lost the air on his rear spoiler on the side of his car, and he went around and wrecked. But it kind of brings up the point that I just mentioned before, like both points. These trucks are way too aero sensitive. Brett Moffitt said that these are the worst for dirty air, which is ironic because everyone says, "Oh, we need to have the racing like the trucks." Well, we kind of do now. But it was cool to see Biffle win. But man, I think it's put up or shut up time for the 4 and the 18, just because there's so many guys, there's so many people waiting in the K&N series. There's so many people that are late model drivers that would die and just kill for a chance, and they're honestly just squandering it.
It had to have been either on Friday afternoon. It had to have been on Friday afternoon or Thursday. It could have been on Thursday, but Kyle Busch was asked by the media at Michigan, what are you going to do with these guys in your trucks? Like, what's going on? And he said that quote that Kevin just said, like, if you're not winning in my trucks, then something's wrong. And he went on to list a bunch of examples: William Byron, Eric Jones, Christopher Bell, all drivers who have made it and are making it. Christopher Bell's going to be in the Cup Series sooner than later. Eric Jones, William Byron, they're already there. He went on to note other drivers that have driven for him, and sadly they're not. It's, if you're not winning in the best equipment in the truck series, you're not going to do yourself any favors. And yes, they have a lot of pressure on them. No doubt about it. Todd Gilliland's probably got the most pressure on anybody out there right now because he's not a rookie anymore, and he still doesn't have a win, and he's driving the best equipment, which is team owner went out there and won 5 races in a row, and they just took some retired driver out from the desert and said, "Hey, come run this race." And yeah, he didn't go out in there and dominate. He only led 18 laps, but he found his way to victory lane. And that says something. That says a lot, not only to the ability of both Kyle Busch and Greg Biffle, but also to the inability of these other drivers who have the full-time gig. So, look, going forward, I'm not saying that they're going to... I don't think Kyle has it in him to make the change in the middle of the season. I think that they'll be able to run out the season and whatnot, but I'm sure that they'll have something in the works for the 2020 season lined up soon, and I don't think Todd Gilliland at this point is part of those discussions just because of his inability so far to win a race.
Yeah, and it's really telling of the development of the way talent is, the way money talks so much. I think when you look at the Cup Series, I honestly think that's why it's the same people, the same 8 to 10 people. You got Harvick, Busch, Truex, Logano, Keselowski, Hamlin, Harvick, the same guys winning every week, and you don't really see like the only real guy that's really emerged in the last 5 years that's new is Chase Elliott and I guess Larson. That's it. That's really all we've got as far as like, hey, these newcomers that they show up and they have the talent and they're winning and they're in the top equipment and they're winning and they're running up front with all these the way developmental has been. It's money is everything. I mean, the only you got these guys who come in with oh, they're late model champions and they're 15 years old and they're spanking people at local short tracks. Well, of course they are. And it's just hard to look at. Like, it's hard for a team to not go, well, I mean, the dude is 15, 16 years old and he won 7 races in his late model. Like, how can you not say like, wow, that's impressive. So I know we're kind of getting away from the truck series race, but it's like there's not a whole lot to talk about just because the race was an absolute wreck fest. It was honestly, it was really weird. One thing that I was surprised about, kind of going back to it, was they got rid of the tire compound in the PJ1 for this race, and I think it's because of the IndyCar race that they ran on Saturday. I think they wanted to get rid of it, which I can understand. I'm sure they don't know how that would react, but I think it would have made the racing a lot better. I think it would have made the racing a lot cleaner, just so they have a second groove, because Texas, after the repave, is just an absolute joke. It's the worst track on the schedule, and it's not even close. But I think for Kyle, this is a wake-up call to honestly maybe start looking for sponsorship on his own and putting drivers and pairing them with sponsors that he can attract. Someone like Ross Chastain and Brett Moffitt, two guys that honestly are the top talents, and it's just like, what what do they have to do to get top rides? They have to find sponsors. The way this sport is, money is literally everything, and I think it's starting to hurt the overall talent pool going into Cup. It's causing a lack of parity, and it's not good for the future. And like I said, we're getting a little off topic, but it's just hard not to talk about. It's just hard not to talk about the fact that these guys they come and go. I mean, one example that I think we'll see gone in a couple years, unless he pulls like what Matt DiBenedetto did, is a Noah Gragson. Comes into the trucks, doesn't do too much, but he's got money. He's got the money, and now he's in junior motorsports, and he kind of has underperformed this year. He's not doing what Byron did, what Chase did in the 9, and the way it is right now, if you're in a race-winning car, you better be winning races.
The Gregson's a weird person, a weird driver, and I look at his Truck Series career, and it's like a series of missed opportunities, because he went out there and he was actually doing well in the Kyle Busch equipment, but something would always happen every week. It seemed like it was inevitable, almost kind of sort of scarily similar to how Stuart Friesen has been doing this season. It's, you see him up front, and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore for whatever reason. And Gregson only got 2 wins in his tenure at Kyle Busch Motorsports, which, granted, is 2 more than any of the other drivers.
Yeah, it's better for sure.
It got Noah a couple of rides in the Xfinity Series last year with Joe Gibbs Racing, and I'll be honest, I was a little bit impressed by his
Richmond.
Richmond was great. I thought he had a shot at possibly winning that one, but it didn't get him a full-time effort over there, and he had to look otherwhere, and he's got the money to look anywhere else.
Elsewhere.
Yeah, elsewhere. I can't talk tonight. I'm exhausted.
Right.
It's it's a Monday after working since 2 a.m, so I'm a little brain fried right now. But Gregson is now at Junior Motorsports, and he is underperforming compared to his full-time teammates. He's ahead of Michael Annett right now in points, but he's also doesn't have a win, and his other teammate Justin Allgaier is well further ahead of him in points and one of his worst seasons to date. So it's like I don't know if it's Junior Motorsports or I don't know if it's Noah Gragson. He's a weird kind of case here because Kyle was actually he brought him up by name. That was the person he was talking about in his Thursday or Friday media availability, where he said something along the lines of, "Look at Noah. He didn't win that much with me, and now he's over elsewhere." You know, like kind of like a backslap, like a slap in the face type of deal there. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that you know with this whole situation with Kyle Busch Motorsports, these guys that are currently driving for him, I think I I I think it might be too late for them unless they just start winning like next week at Iowa. It's over right now, and there's going to be a new lineup going forward over Kyle Busch Motorsports because, like you said, there's so much talent coming up, so much talent in the K&N series. Just look at in the truck series itself, Tyler Ankrum. He's
I was
driving
really impressed.
a really impressive run by him. He came in third on Friday night. He's driving David Gilliland equipment, so he's driving for Todd's dad, which is still Toyota equipment, but it's not Kyle Busch equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at him, and he got into a wreck earlier in the race, and he was still able to battle back, and he started 8th, he finished 3rd. You look at his teammate, she finished 22nd. Like, that's impressive to me, and you'll see guys like him, maybe he'll get a call up to Kyle Busch next year, or maybe later this year. Who knows? I'm interested to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the cream always rises to the top. I mean, there's guys that just come and go. I mean, look at the old days with when Roush was the team to be on. You see like a Danny O'Quinn or a Todd Cleaver, like to throw it back. Like those guys were like, oh man, they're so good, they're gonna be great, and then they didn't do anything, and then they're gone. Because I mean, you see guys back then like. I mean, they were basically cranking out champions every single 2 or 3 years. You had Biffle, you had Kurt Busch, you had Carl Edwards, you had all these guys coming through the ranks, just almost like a mirror image with Gibbs and Kyle Busch. You had Eric Jones, you had William Byron, you have Christopher Bell, all these young guys coming through with legitimate talent and the ability to win. And now you have Harrison Burton and Todd Gilliland, and I mean you like you said, Gregson's like in the middle. I've never been particularly impressed with his talent, but it's so hard to like criticize these guys because they're basically kids. They're still in their early 20s or in their teens. It's just the way the NASCAR world is. If you're not in a cup ride by the time you're 22, 23, you're over the hill, which is so bizarre. Like it's weird to think of that. I mean, when Biffle got his cup ride, I think he was 30 years old. When Scott Riggs and all these guys, they were considered young guys. They were in their late 20s, and it was fine. Just the way it is now, like you got to get into a cup ride by the time you're 22, 23, and it's such a bizarre state the way it is, and obviously it's the money. The money is the issue, but I hope you're right because I mean, look at like Austin Hill. He wasn't in the best equipment last year. Now he's at Hattori Racing, and he's doing a lot better. Tyler Ankrum's doing really well. He's run top 10, top 5 the whole entire season. He's had some misfortune, but he's run up front. Finished third after nearly wrecking down the pit. So I mean, uh, the cream will rise to the top. I mean, Chastain and Moffitt are a perfect example of that. It's just you got to find the sponsorship. You got to find the money. It's I'm not gonna say that it's over for him yet, especially Harrison. Harrison is he's very young. He's incredibly young, and he's got the name um, with Burton. I mean, he's got his dad and his mom. They're huge supporters, and I think he'll be around for a little bit longer. And he's actually, I think, outperforming Todd. I think Todd is going to have to rely on going back to DGR Crosley for a ride probably next year. We'll see. We'll see who goes into that inevitable 4 car. I think it's going to be Haley Deegan, which we'll talk about later. But to kind of close out, I mean, we barely talked about the truck race just because, like I said, there's not much, but it was really cool to see Greg Biffle come back out of nowhere. He basically admitted that like he was learning things on the fly during the race. I mean, it's proof that like you have to. It's like riding a bike. I mean, you can definitely ride one, but you have to be kind of muscle memory, and you have to know how these cars and trucks act. You have to know how they race to perform at a high level. And 3 years away from Cup, nearly 15 years away from the trucks, and he actually managed to pull it out because he was in a really good truck. And it shows that talent can still win when you have good equipment.
Biffle won the first leg of the Triple Truck Challenge, but he's not eligible next week at Iowa because he didn't make the deadline to register for the event.
Yep.
Now, Marcus Lemonis did say on Twitter that he's going to see what he can do, but I don't know. That's I guess that was the rule that you had to be registered for the event to be able to go for the big prize at the end. But
Right.
essentially, with now Biffle being excluded, whether he gets to race or not, their triple truck challenge has kind of got a little of a asterisk mark on there because they offered this big huge prize to whoever could win all 3 races, and now they're saying, oh, the guy who won the first race, well, he's not eligible for the second race anyway, so nobody's gonna get that prize anyway. So like, what are they gonna promote going forward? They kind of like shot themselves in the foot on that one.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Lemonis is probably one of the coolest like rich people I know. I mean, I've never personally met him, but we've kind of reaped the benefits of him being a nice guy, getting tickets to Talladega from him because of our friend Ryan. So I'm sure if he actually does want to show up to Iowa and he ends up being somewhat like he actually gets the qualification registry to participate. I'm sure Marcus will be at the front of his support because he's the series sponsor. I mean, how can you defy him at this point? But it'd be cool if he can get involved. Like you said, it kind of just makes the the prize and the special event kind of meaningless when you have a guy who wins and is eligible become ineligible because he doesn't register. I didn't think you had to. I guess it wasn't common knowledge that you had to. I always just thought, well, if he's in the race, then he should be eligible. Like there shouldn't be a registry. It should be like if you started a race, that is your eligibility. But whatever. That's a weird thing. That's when paperwork and bureaucracy gets in the way of such a basic idea like, well, if you win or if you haven't won and then you qualify, you qualify. It's like, well, no, you have to register. That's so stupid to me, but we'll see for Iowa. I love Iowa as it is, so it'll be fun for me.
It in my opinion, I think that if there was a guarantee that he was going to be able to do something, it would need to be done. That guarantee would need to be made either today or tomorrow, because the Kyle Busch isn't going to have a fifth truck team just like sitting there waiting in the wings. So
Right.
he's already got 4 trucks that are heading out there to Iowa, and I don't foresee. I don't think they're going to uproot one of those paid drivers for someone who's not bringing anything to the table. Sorry to say, Biffle, he was out there with the blank fire suit for a reason. He was just filling in for a race that Kyle couldn't sell to somebody, and
Right.
it worked out for Kyle in the long run because it made him, pretty smart for making that decision. But it's not gonna make him any money if Biffle's not bringing any sponsorship to the table. And I don't think any of the 4 drivers that are heading to Iowa are going to be uprooted for him. But we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that somehow, some way they do get it so that Greg Biffle can race and continue on to try and win the ultimate prize at the end of the Triple Truck Challenge. But that was just something I want to bring up. It kind of irked me a little bit, but Marcus Lemonis is the man, and I'm hoping that him going to see what he can do to help works out for everybody. But we'll move on. Trucks is in the rearview mirror. That was Friday night, Truck Series night in America. Now we move on to Saturday afternoon, and we go to the Irish Hills of Michigan, where the NASCAR Xfinity Series ran the LTI Printing 200.
250.
Was it 250? Yeah, it was 250. Yeah. And it was an okay race. There was some strategy at the end, which played into Tyler Reddick taking home the victory. So that was a little fun to see. They had the big 3 up there for pretty much the entire race, and the 2 faster ones were Bell and Custer, and they didn't end up with a victory because they didn't have the right strategy at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we'll get to Cup in a little bit, but I think this from a an interesting standpoint, more entertaining standpoint. I think it's been back-to-back weeks for like overall products, like being able to pass and strategy and just the overall dynamic of the race. I really enjoyed the Xfinity race when I could watch it. It seems like I watch the middle of these races and then I can't see the last bits of the stage until 10 to go. But I did see that there was some strategy involved. So I mean, I think this week was redemption for Reddick. For last week, basically squandering an otherwise easy win. Just get through turn 3 at Pocono and you're good to go. So he managed to get lucky and just be on the right strategy call. Poor Custer does the exact same thing. He completely, I wouldn't say dominates, but he was up front for a majority of the race and just is on the wrong side of strategy. But it just goes to show that there is definitely a big 3 in Xfinity. You got Reddick, you got Custer, you got Bell. And it's just, I feel like we're going to echo the same things every week, but it's those 3 guys. And I feel like every week, one of those 3 guys are going to win. And that's about it. And I have no problem with that because those 3 put on a show every single week. So, I mean, the stage racing was good. The stage finishes were good. I mean, Bell passed Custer for the stage 2 win.
That was Menard. That wasn't Custer. Menard was up there.
You're right. Yeah, Menard. I forget Menard even was in this race. So, yeah, Bell passes Menard with 2 to go to solidify the stage victory. It was a good race. I mean, the fact that they can get around and pass. And one thing that I noticed just throughout the race, they could get really good runs down the straightaways. I mean, it almost like it was like that last week at Pocono too. Like they actually could get really good runs down the straightaways. And I mean, obviously once you get to the corner, there's some dirty air involved, but I mean, it kept the racing really interesting, especially towards the end because you had Annette and Gregson catching Reddick because he was by himself. I mean, I think they were pretty even on tires, if I remember correctly, and they were actually catching him going towards the end. It might have just been because of fuel or whatever, but they were actually making progress catching him, and it was just an interesting race, just because the groove kind of widened out a little bit, and they used the bottom more than they ever did the last 5 years since they repaved it. So that was encouraging to see. It was I really enjoyed the Xfinity race this week.
The final caution of the day at lap 78 set up what was Tyler Reddick's victory when Tommy Joe Martins got loose underneath Chase Briscoe and spun him out in turn 2. That set up like a weird instance where some guys might be able to actually make it from there. They just got off of a caution prior when the '08 and the 42 had wrecked a couple laps earlier than that. But a couple of guys opted to come back in and top off, and Tyler Reddick was one of them. Christopher Bell was the leader at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and Bell, his team actually told him to come in and pit, but there was a breakdown in communication, and Bell actually ended up staying out. Custer was right behind him, and his crew told him, do whatever the 20 does. So the 20 was faking in, and then he faked out, and the 0-0 was told to do what he does, so he followed him right back out, and then a good chunk of the field comes in after that, including Reddick. That sets them up for about a 45 lap run to the end of the race.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bell's leading, but he doesn't have the long run speed like Custer does, so Custer takes over the lead. And then they both got a pit with like 10 laps to go because they don't have enough gas. Reddick was saving. He was saving that entire last run, and it worked out for him because he was able to pull into victory lane. But you had, like you said, Noah Gragson and Michael Annett both catching him in the last couple laps there, which it was very interesting to see that play out, whether they were all going to make it or not, because some of them didn't pit that caution. They pitted the caution prior to that, and so there was differing fuel strategies there. Paul Menard, mentioned him just a couple minutes ago. He started on pole, and honestly, it looked like he was just going to be another Cup guy in the field, dominating and taking the entire race away from everybody. But
Yeah.
then Christopher Bell passed him at the end of stage 2, when we never really heard from Menard again. So Menard ended up coming home 4th, and then Justin Allgaier ended up coming in 5th. So decent race. It was definitely a lot better than truck race was, just because it was a lot cleaner and there was a lot more actual racing going on and not wrecking. Tyler
Yeah.
Reddick definitely earned that one, and he's got a pretty healthy point lead now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's obviously the favorite just because if he can get some consistency, which he already has, like if he can just start raking off wins, which I think he will through the summer, I think it's like I said, it's going to be the big three, and I think that's going to be the way it is going into Homestead with a +1. It was cool to see. Menard likes to run this race. I mean, he's won this race. I think he won it in the 33 car a few years ago, and it's he's obviously a Cup guy, but I mean, it's not the norm. He's not like a Harvick or a Keselowski or a Logano or a Busch coming in and just becoming the immediate favorite. So it was cool to see him win stage 1 and then obviously battle for stage 2. And obviously he kind of fell into the back, and the way traffic is in dirty areas, you really see how good a car is. I mean, he's still fast. I mean, faster than Cindric, who's been in the series the whole year. So once again, shows that he does belong in Cup, whether you hate that he is because of his dad's money. He obviously has the talent. Um, it's just weird. It's so weird to see these Cup guys bank them every week. Like when they're there and they actually you just know that they're gonna win. It's so disheartening, and there's always that nostalgia, like, oh well, you had these guys running, you had Burton and Martin and even Harvick back in the day, like you had all these guys, Earnhardt, Martin, Mark Martin running back in the day, and no one really cared. I think it was just because, yeah, Mark Martin has one of the highest wins in the series, but I mean, it wasn't like just pure domination. Like these guys had legitimate talent, and the cars were a lot closer. Now it's like you put a Cup guy in your car, and you go from having a 10th place car to a 3rd or a 4th place car, and with the exception of maybe 5 guys in Xfinity. I mean, we were talking about it before we went on the air. There's like the top 12 is set, and it's just because the combination of like the cars are just not competitive enough anymore. I was watching, not to go on a quick tangent, too far of a tangent, but I was watching a race at Nashville Fairgrounds from the Grand National Series in 2000, and you had guys in Hendrick equipment and Roush equipment running in the 30s because the field was so close. And they just had a bad qualifying effort, and it was just so close that they really couldn't do anything, and they got lapped. And the funny part is, when they got lapped, they were running just as fast as the leader. You don't see that anymore. You see guys who are running 20th and they're a half second off the pace at the very, very minimum. It's weird. It's a weird state the way we have it right now. There's a lot of talent coming in, but there's not a lot of healthy rides for them to go into.
There's a definite gap between the haves and haves nots, not only in the Cup Series, but definitely in the Xfinity Series. And uh, like we were talking about before we went on air, I think that they should kind of chop down the playoff field from 12 to at most 8. Maybe I'll compromise on like a 10 or something, because right now they're set. Ross Chastain dropped out. He's now running for truck points. So you got Brandon Jones sitting in 12th, and then you've got a 85 point gap to 13th place, which is Greg Galding. 85 points is a lot. That's about 2 races.
2 races, yeah.
So I don't know if Gray's going to have it in him to outpoint Brandon Jones consecutive week after week after week to be able to get into that 12th spot. I'm not saying it's not possible, because, of course, the math, it is possible. It's just very unlikely. And, yeah, you could say that one of these guys like Gray Galding or Jeremy Clements, they could get into victory lane at a place like a super speedway or at a road course, or something funky going on where they use the right strategy to just to play everybody. But it's highly unlikely at this point. So it's the Xfinity Series. You only really got the big 3 to worry about this year. Honestly, I don't really think anybody else in the series is worth, even at this moment at least, worth a shot at the championship anyway.
Yeah. I just wanted to glance at the points. I didn't realize how bad it was. When you look at top tens, um, let's just go from, like, say, John Hunter Nemechek, who's in 7th, to Brandon Jones, the back half of the top 12. Nemechek has 9 top tens. Gregson's in 8th with 6. Annette has 9 top tens. Justin Haley, surprisingly enough, has 10, and he's in 10th in points. Ryan Sieg having a really good year. He's 11th, and Brandon Jones has 7 top tens. Craig Galding has 1. He has 1 top 5 and 1 top 10, and that was at Talladega. So without a wild card plate race, he has no top tens. He has no top 5s. The next guy that has a top 10 is Josh Williams in 17th. And then you have Jeffrey Earnhardt, who's run literally less than half of the series with 6 starts. He's got 3 top 10s and 1 top 5 in 6 races. So it's obvious that there's a huge disparity in the points. And it's so bizarre. And I think you're absolutely right. If this was an 8-car field or even a 10-car field, it would be an awesome battle. You would have a huge battle between 6 or 7 guys trying to vie for the last 2 or 3 spots, and it'd actually be really entertaining. But I don't foresee Brendan Jones. I mean, as inconsistent as he is, and I honestly don't think he deserves that ride at this point. I think there's 5 or 6 guys I can name off the top of my head that deserves that ride more than him. At this point, he's in. He's 100% in. The only way he gets out, and like we were talking about it before, you have the road courses coming up, and then you have Daytona. Those are the only 2 or 3 races that we really could see a huge shakeup in the points. And even then, like, honestly, they'd be wasting a spot. They have no shot at the championship. I don't foresee a Greg Galding or a Brandon Brown. As impressive as he's been in that 86 car, he's been running top 10 sometimes. He hasn't gotten a top 10, but he's been running top 15 pretty often. He's not going to be a threat at the championship at all. I think the 12 guys that are in there now may not all have a legitimate shot, but they all have a legitimate shot at making the top four. I think all of them have a legitimate shot at making the top four, just because they're going to have that one spot they're all going to be vying for. I think all of them have a shot, but that's it. The top 12 is set. Like you mentioned, the top 12 is done. And it shouldn't be like that. It should not be this much of a disparity in the second biggest series in NASCAR. It's really pathetic, and it's really disappointing to see. I had no idea until you brought it up to me before we started the show. It's a bizarre the way the series is right now. It's really bizarre. I mean, you have Mike Harmon, 31st in points with 11 starts and 85 points. That means he's only scoring 8 points a race. What is going on?
Let me ask you a question, and it's kind of on topic, kind of off topic, but I'm interested to know your thoughts on this. If they were to open it up again, let's say, forget the license rules, forget you can only score points in the Cup Series, you can only score points in the Truck Series, you have to choose. Let's say that they open it up and they let anybody run for whatever points throughout the entire season again. Would you welcome that? Would you like to see some of the Cup drivers go down and maybe take one of these teams that is struggling and has drivers in their cars that shouldn't be, or some of these pay drivers, or some of these younger. I'm not saying that we should take seats away from up and coming drivers. I'm using this as an example. Like, let's say that Joey Logano wants to run now both the Cup and Xfinity Series. Would you welcome something like that?
I think it's a yeah, but I would 100% welcome it if they were going into a ride similar to when Greg Biffle was in the 27, something like that, or when Almirola would show up in the 98 before it had Stuart Haas affiliation. Um,
So what you're saying is, yay, Cup drivers, but no Cup teams. Like,
well,
don't
like,
mix Cup drivers and Cup teams together.
well, the issue is that I 100% would welcome it if there was enough competitive rides for everybody, and unfortunately, there's just not. It's not like if like say, um, William Byron or Chase Elliott go to the 23, John Hunter Nemechek can go and ride for like say uh, the Davis, one of the Davis cars, and he would just go from the 23 to like say the 4 and go from running 5th to running 8th. I mean, that's basically going from running a top 5 to basically you're running 18th the whole race, and you're going to go a lap down. The disparity in the equipment is so bad that there's no way that they would encourage that. Like, I just don't see someone like Joey Logano volunteering to go drive for the 36 car. Like, I just don't see that happening. I don't foresee a Kyle Busch or an Eric Jones volunteering to go race for like the 78 car, the 01. Like, it's not going to happen, just because the it's not even a disparity in talent. It's such a disparity in equipment that it's so bad. There's not 35 competitive cars. There's not even 10. I don't even think there's 10. The max is, I mean, the 12 we have are the competitive vehicles, and that's it. That's all that we have. So, I mean, I would 100% be for it, but before we can do that, we have to fix this huge disparity in cost and bending and overall equipment abilities and equality. Just because, like I mentioned, go watch a race from the late 90s, early 90s, and early 2000s. Uh, there's 30 guys, there's 30 cars that can win. I mean, there's obviously front runners, but I mean, there are cars that would run fifth one week and run 30th the next. That does not happen anymore.
Kyle Busch kind of gets a lot of flack for coming down and racing in the Xfinity series, and I feel like that's unfair because you got guys like Keselowski that do it. You've had Harvick in past seasons, and many other Cup guys that have made multiple starts in the Xfinity series and would honestly probably run as much of the season as they could if they could. I feel like maybe NASCAR kind of painted this box that we live in right now where the the taboo has been made where they're saying to the fans, we don't want the Cup drivers racing in Xfinity and we're going to limit them. So the fans look at that as, oh well, they shouldn't be here, when that's hasn't been the history of the sport. Like you said, Mark Martin in the 90s he became the most winningest driver in the Xfinity series before Kyle Busch. And you've had guys like Carl Edwards and Kevin Harvick and Clint Boyer and uh, I honestly I would like to go back to those probably around like mid 2000s era.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That would probably that type of the types of teams that we had then, the types of cars, the types the mixture of drivers and from Cup, from Xfinity, upcomers, older. That was really a fun time in the sport, and I feel like we've gone away from that just because of these taboos that have been set up by the sanctioning body of the limits for races and stuff like that. So that's my thoughts on it. I just wanted to get yours on it too.
Yeah. No, I mean you're right. Like if you look at statistically speaking, like even from like a rating standpoint, the mid 2000s is the most successful era of NASCAR. Whether or not you want to agree with it, it's after uh, arguably the best decade for the growth of NASCAR. I mean the like between 2003 and 2007, the sport was thriving. I mean, we had 60 cars show up at Daytona for the 500. We don't even get 40 now. That's huge. And it's a combination because, I mean, back then we had an era of car. You could find a car from 1998, throw a new body on it, and you'd be just as fast as the guy who just built a new car out of a Hendrick shop. Uh, it, it was nice. It was a good time. And I think a lot of like Steve Phelps mentioned it on the Dale Jr. Download. They've made a lot of mistakes, and they've put themselves in this box that they need to somehow get themselves out of, and it, they obviously will not go backwards. They have too much pride for that, and it's disappointing because I think they should. Um, they've really put themselves in a box with these changes to the car and changes to the rules, and the money is the biggest issue. We talk about it every week. The money is ruining the sport. Um, one thing that I noticed, or one thing that I found out in one of our Facebook groups, um, not to get a little off topic, I'm talking about IndyCar, but I learned that Penske pays the bills are the exact same to pay for the 2 car in Cup, for example, and to pay for the 1, the 2, the 12, and the 22 in IndyCar. So 4 cars cost the same as 1 car in Cup in comparing the two. If that's how it was, these teams were spending that much money, and they just said, well, let's cut the cost by 25%, and you guys just spend the same amount of money. We would go from having 10, 12 competitive teams to 30 competitive teams vying for spots every week. There's so much money. There's so much money coming from these TV deals, and these teams are not getting it, and they're being forced by the sheer force of competition. They're pricing themselves out, and now there's no good teams down in Xfinity and trucks because those teams don't have the money to be paying for $500,000 rides. They don't have the money to be putting that out because they don't get the money back in the prize money. It doesn't make sense. The system is broken. The entire system is broken, and we have no one to blame but the sanctioning body of NASCAR.
Yeah, it's sad to see, for sure. But we'll move on. We'll we're already 50 minutes in. Let's uh let's get to the Cup Series race. Yesterday it was supposed to happen at 2 o'clock. Didn't happen. It got rained. Just like at Dover, they got on the track, started doing some pace laps, got as close as one to go, and then it just started coming down, and eventually they had to bring the cars back down pit road, and drivers got out of the cars, and they didn't call it yet, and it was kind of fun watching uh, Bubba Wallace and Corey LaJoy out there playing catch with the fans with the
Yeah, that was
football. Yeah, but unfortunately they didn't get going yesterday, and they had to postpone it. Now, normally you would think, well, let's try and get it done as early as we can in the day, so everybody could get home. You would think probably around like a 11 or 12 o'clock start on a Monday. No, they waited till 5 o'clock. Now, granted, weather wasn't great this morning, and it was still raining around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, but they postponed it till 5, and that was because of the Women's World Cup.
fun. Right.
So, you had to keep all these teams and drivers and crew members and everybody sitting around all day waiting to go, and then we do go. I'll get into that a little bit later, but we did get the green flag a couple minutes after 5. Race ended a couple minutes after 8. About a 3-hour race. It was, I don't know, it was okay. I was trying to watch it in between doing work related things today, and I actually had to pull over my car because my shift ended around like 7:30. So I was in the middle of driving home, and I pulled over on the side of the road just so I could watch the green white checker that happened to see if anybody was going to knock Logano off. That didn't happen. Logano was dominant all day, leading 163 of the 203 laps that were run today. And Kurt Busch tried to put on a show at the end, but essentially Joey Logano won from the pole, and that's where my hang-up is. I don't know if I want to say it was a good race or not because of the dominance that the 22 car portrayed.
It The best way I can summarize this race is if you saw a picture of it at any point, you would think, "Wow, this race was really good." Um, it reminded me a lot of the races at Daytona from the late '90s to the mid 2000s. The racing was close. There was a lot of stuff happening second on back. Um, that was about it. The leader was the leader, and that was the end of it. The racing was incredible compared to the way it's been the last few years here. Just because, man, uh, Michigan has become so bad since they repaved it. Just because it used to be run up against the wall, or you run all the way to the bottom, or you're in the middle. It was a 5-6 lane track, and it was fun, but it was spread out. And then you go to the new repave, and then it's just basically a single line fest. You run the second lane, and the very bottom just has a little bit less banking. So if you go down there, you have a little bit less grip, but it's the only place you really can get clean air. And that's how it was today for the most part. So you have a race that looks really good. They're really close, and they are passing for everything else besides the lead. And there was a couple instances where there was passes for the lead. Most of the time, it was Logano coming through traffic, and he had a bad fast car. You cannot take it away from him that he had easily the best car this week. Won the pole, dominated 2/3 of the race, and he won. And you can say the best car definitely won, but the I just feel like we echo every single week. This package is not what they foresaw. I think when they put this 8-inch spoiler, they were foreseeing like, all right, Michigan is it. Like if this does not work at Michigan, it's done. And I really enjoyed today's race. I even said like in one of the chats and then in one of our groups for Facebook, like it got a huge huge negative reaction. And I thought, wow, like I thought there was just going to get a really good reaction because man, they were really close. I mean, we understand that the leader's hard to pass. It's like that every single week. What's the difference? But they really did not like it. Um, I thought it was a fun race, especially seeing uh, Harvick, Truex, Kurt Busch coming back and forth, and they were jostling for position, and they started realizing late at the end of the race that they have to work together. Uh, I really, for a Michigan race, I thought it was fun. I thought the best car won. It was fun for me. What did you think, just initially?
It might be weird to say, but this race kind of reminded me a lot of Martinsville. And the reason that I say that is because there was action. There definitely was stuff going on. And it wasn't like Logano was just, running away with the show. He had pressure the entire race. Just like Keselowski had pressure the entire Martinsville race, Logano didn't have this win in the bag by any means. Kevin Harvick came up there and he put on a show, and uh, Kurt Busch came up there, and Martin Truex Jr. came up there, and you had all these different drivers come up and try and take it. Alex Bowman at the end of the first stage was right on Logano's bumper, but he couldn't do anything with it, and Logano went on to win stage one. Stage two was a little bit uh, different just because of the pit strategy that happened where again, guys not making the right calls and not being able to make it the entire rest of the way on the stage. So Logano being one of them. But, in the same breath, these guys are all about their track position. That's exactly what it was today. They were opting to take 0 or 2 tires just to get a better track position instead of taking 4 tires, which was the safer route. But track position was key all day today. So they opted not to pit at one point, which meant that they couldn't make it to the end of the stage. And sure enough, Austin Dillon goes on to win stage two because a bunch of people pit. But Logano takes the lead right back, and in stage three, he pretty much goes on and he has a little bit of a battle with Harvick for a little bit. I'm looking here at the laps. They took the green at lap 126, I want to say, to start stage three. Or no, they took it at 128. Harvick goes out and he takes over the lead, and then Logano takes it back, and then Harvick takes it back, and then Logano, and then Harvick, and then Logano. So they were going like back and forth for a little bit, and eventually Logano just was like, "Nah, I'm taking this," and he ended up not really giving it back after that point. So it was interesting in that sense, and that's kind of why I likened it to Martinsville.
Yeah, I mean, one race that I really kind of compare it to is Texas. A perfect like a race where everyone was kind of close to each other, but there was nothing really much happening. A lot of people like that race. Uh,
That's
this
weird why
pack,
nobody really liked this race though.
that's why I said like they're so comparable. You have basically wide open. One thing I noticed when Keselowski and Byron stayed out late in that race, they waited a long time because they just pitted later to get their final pit stop. They oh, I got people talking behind me. They they were wide open by themselves with old 30 lap tires. So the tires obviously didn't matter. You can see that with Harvick. He went from running second to running 10th, and he really didn't do anything. He was pretty much a non-factor the rest of the race.
I'll say that the package definitely made this one of the more enjoyable races at Michigan that we've had in quite a while. I'll definitely admit that. Is it the fix? No, it's definitely not the fix. It's definitely not the racing that anybody's looking for. Nobody wants to see the leader have pretty much the race in the bag because of the arrow. Logano opted so many times to take 2 or 0 tires or whatever it was, and yeah, he had the fastest car all day, so you really can't take that away from him. But when you get behind people who have been slower than you for most of the day, and they're able to hold you off because of just having the track position, that's not really a working package in my eyes. But yeah, I mean, I would say if I had to go one way or the other, I'd say yes, this was a good race today. A lot better than most Michigan races, and I'm fading real fast. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I'm fading pretty quick here, so
It's fine.
um,
Um,
go ahead.
no, you're fine. I got stuff going on behind me, so I'm trying to stay not distracted. Um, it like I mentioned before, like you have the last 5 or 6 years. I think it's the best race in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, the quality of racing has diminished so much that we're relying on this to become good racing. I mean, like I mentioned before, you take a picture of it and they're 2 and 3 wide and they're all really close. You think, wow, this racing is really good. But it's honestly, it's just basically a still picture in motion. Oh my God. Um,
Jarvis.
yeah, we got a Jarvis sighting.
I think that's our
I
first Jarvis on the podcast.
Yeah, I can't wait to get out of this living room area. The uh, the racing, this Gen 6 is, oh my God, I love it. This Gen 6 is a colossal failure, and the fact that we have to rely to this is honestly just really sad.
Yeah, it is. I can't wait for 2021 because we're definitely gonna see something different, like we talked about last week. The overall, looking at the, I guess we could really wrap up. I'm sad because like the race just happened. We should have so much to talk about. There's really not much to talk about though, because of just the way that it all ended up. Logano won this race because he was best car, and that's pretty much all you can say for this. Kyle Busch, he was in the back and he came up to finish fifth. That's good on Kyle Busch. Martin Truex, he started around Kyle Busch, but he worked his way to the front earlier, and Martin Truex ended up with third place finish. Kevin Harvick, I mean, we could talk about Kevin Harvick's pit crew still failing him at this point in the season,
Yeah, no
where
matter where he goes, he has a bad pit crew. It's just so bizarre.
it's crazy to think that they can be here in week 15 of the season after all the issues that they've had and continue to have loose wheels and continue to, screw him and take him out of the race. Granted, they did it early in the race and he was able to come back from it. But even still, like, he could have been up there. He could have been the dominant car. He could have been the one just absolutely running away from the field in Logano's shoes. But we didn't get to see that because his pit crew put him in that predicament. So, Bowman had some contact with Chase at one point in the race, and Elliott had moved out of line abruptly, and Alex wasn't going as fast, and it ended up curling up the quarter panel and screwing up the arrow on the 88. So you saw him drop back. So I mean, there are things to talk about in this race, and it's pretty fresh in my mind. There was some pit road issues with Jimmy Johnson. There were, there was the Clint Boyer wreck. So, this race did have a lot of stuff going on. I don't want to say it's not worth talking about because of just how much Logano's win, just his dominance today, just overshadows all of that.
Yeah, it's like I said before. Kurt Busch was awesome. He was really entertaining today, but it was behind everything that was important. And that's for the lead. The one thing that we were hoping for with this change was more passing for the lead, and we just haven't gotten it. So 2021 can't come soon enough. I really hope they don't run this in 2020. I hope they just make a complete 180 And I understand that they're trying to get this 550 horsepower to be the new norm. I hope they just say, well, we'll run the 550 horsepower, but we'll go back to a 2-inch spoiler or 2.5-inch spoiler just to see. Let's just see. There's no point in running this again. Like just complete 180 on the aero side. Let's just
Just
see
take the
how it
damn
is.
spoiler off.
Well, they can if they're running slow enough. If they're running slow enough on the straightaways, they can actually do some interesting things. Let's shorten the quarter panel up a little bit. Let's take the side skirt off. Remove the splitter, or let's at least like shorten it to what it was last year. Like let's do something different for 2020. I don't think they will. They made their bed with this, and I think they're going to stay with it. But I enjoyed the race. It was frustrating, but at this point, I'm used to being frustrated for the lead, like not seeing any leaders, like lead changes. Oh my gosh, Jarvis, killing me. Um, but
For a
I mean,
2019 package race, this was
this was probably the best race other than say Talladega.
or Kansas. I would say
Right.
Kansas would be probably the tops at a skill track. So I don't know. It's we'll we'll see how it is at the road course in 2 weeks. It's going to be interesting to see how the added spoiler and lower. Are they running the lower horsepower or are they
I think they're
running?
running the 750. I think they're running
Okay.
basically the short track package. Which I mean, golly, if they ran the 550 horsepower, that'd be a really bad race.
Yeah, that'd pretty much be like New Hampshire that one year that they put plates on it.
Right, right. 300 laps led by Burton.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that ever again.
No.
I mean, the carousel will be something that's old but new. We'll see a preview of it, like say, like peak antifreeze series tomorrow. I said that last week was tomorrow, but it's actually tomorrow.
Right.
So we'll see that. But uh, I hope to God we don't see Arrow push at Sonoma. But I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if I start hearing that as an issue, especially in the carousel. It's going to be one of the fastest corners of the track, so we'll see.
I just hit my microphone. That's sorry, microphone. I didn't mean that.
Maybe we should maybe we should call this one short. It's definitely not one of our best efforts, but damn it, we're giving it our best.
We'll call it. Let's give us like 10 more minutes just to go over a couple more things, just because there was a lot of racing going on outside the NASCAR world. I mean, I'll skip over this point because this is the one I want to talk about. So don't look at that point that you're highlighting on the sheet. But yeah, there we go. We'll do IndyCar raced at Texas too. With the trucks, they kind of like double headlined with the trucks running on Friday night, IndyCar being on Saturday night. And the IndyCar race was kind of a snoozer at the beginning where they were having their own aero issues. And Takuma Sato was leading for a good portion of it. And then he ran over his crew member and ended up losing a bunch of laps.
That was wild.
That was crazy. Thankfully, the crew member was okay and just had a couple of bruises on him, and he was able to walk it off and laugh it off. So good news there. But then you had Ryan Hunter-Ray and Scott Dixon up there, and they were going at it, and then Dixon ended up wrecking with Herta, which was pretty sad because Herta was stealing the show coming through the field. And then at the end of the race, you had Newgarden come out of nowhere, and Newgarden ended up stealing one with pit strategy. He was able to hold off Alexander Rossi in the closing laps, where it did get a little bit more racy at the end when they did go down into the nighttime. I guess for IndyCar, just like NASCAR with this type of package, nighttime is the right time.
Mm-hmm.
But they were putting on a show for a couple laps there on the final restart. It looked like Rossi was making the right moves, and he just wasn't able to pull them off. And it was like, I want to say like 5 laps in a row, Rossi was going on the outside and trying to clear Newgarden, but Newgarden just had that nose, and Rossi didn't want to like force it and wreck himself, so he kept backing out of it, and then eventually it just became too late for him, and Newgarden was able to pull away.
Yeah, I like the IndyCar race. It was really fast paced the first half, and then we had a couple cautions. But Ever since they moved to this new low downforce package, it's been really good at the road courses, but not so much at the speedways. I think it's just because they have less overall lateral grip, and the dirty air is just as bad as it was with the old cars. Just they have way less grip overall. So you have a really bizarre case of the racing improving everywhere, but at the ovals, which is typically the most fun races nowadays. Uh, Texas used to be really fun, and I think if it was still 24 degrees in 1 and 2, it'd be an absolute like just fantastic show. But it was getting really frustrating just to see Rossi make a run and not be able to pull it off. And he was all passing, but it was very much you had to really organize a run for 10, 12 laps and get the right run at the right time. And Newgarden pitted with that under caution when I thought Ryan Hunter-Reay should have pitted because he wasn't going to make it on fuel until that caution came out with like 8 or 9 laps to go, or 10, 11 laps to go, whatever it was, 15 to go. He pitted early, and then under green flag, he managed to just get a little bit less fuel than the rest of the field in front of him, and he leapfrogged everybody, and that's what won him the race. So, I mean, Newgarden is just on fire, just as he was last year. He's probably once again he's the favorite. I mean, but I think it's gonna be a really good championship race from here on out. Texas is always like that good like second helping of really good oval racing right after the 500. So it's always a popular race for me, at least to watch. I always watch it. So I enjoyed it for what it was, for sure.
Yeah, I would say of the two races at Texas that weekend, I'd say IndyCar definitely took the cake for that one. The other open wheel big series was in North America. The Formula One decided to stop into Canada to race at Circuit Gilles de Villeneuve, and there was some controversies there, which now we're getting to the controversy part of our this is what I was looking forward to all night. So now I'm actually I'm awake now, so I'm ready to talk about this stuff. So let's bang this out. The Formula One Grand Prix in Canada, it should have been won by Sebastian Vettel, and Sebastian Vettel crossed the line first, but the F1 stewards they penalized him. And Kevin, I don't know if you were able to finally take a look at the incident that occurred. It really wasn't an incident, it was just Vettel screwing up and then getting back on track. But
Right.
the way that they had penalized Vettel was because he caused a block or an unsafe maneuver, where more or less it really wasn't that. It was Vettel going too hard into the corner, and he ended up getting to the grass, and then he was saving his car. And as he was saving his car, Hamilton was coming up on him really fast, and Hamilton tried to make a move around the outside while Vettel was still saving his car with the grass on the tires, and Hamilton had to back off because if he would have kept going, they both would have wrecked. So Formula One ended up, instead of letting Vettel keep his 1.5 second lead, they penalized him 5 seconds and handed the win over to Hamilton.
Wow. I just watched it for the first time as you were saying that. How is that a penalty?
Right?
Like, what?
Okay.
Like that's all I gotta say. How is that a penalty? And the FIA is an absolute joke if that's a penalty. Like they just took away from Vettel. I mean, like there's no contact. There's no contact, and honestly, it didn't really change the race because Vettel. Well, what? That's ridiculous. What? That's just ridiculous. Wow.
It doesn't make any sense to me because it wasn't a malicious move at all by Vettel. He screwed up going into that corner, and he was just trying to correct himself to keep going straight. You got to figure that those tires going through grass, it's got to be like ice. So he's just trying to get the grip back, and at that point, Hamilton's coming a lot faster, sure, but Vettel really doesn't have control of his car. Thankfully, they don't make any contact, and Hamilton backs out. And you know what? Hamilton's a class act, because at the ceremony at the end where they're getting their podium stuff taken care of, they do the podium in Formula One. Hamilton actually took Vettel by the shoulder and brought him up to the front, the top step, the first place step, because I'm pretty sure Hamilton knows how much of a bullcrap call that was. Like, that just it doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever why they would do that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I have little to say just because I literally just watched it, but what? That's just that's just insane. I mean, if that happened in NASCAR, I can't imagine how the community would react.
Absolute chaos.
It'd be just ridiculous. I mean, that's just such an over like oh that's such over officiating. I mean, they just made something like that happen with Max Verstappen. Same exact thing. Um, wow, wow, just FIA. Wow, that's two calls in the last 3 weeks where that's just you've completely ruined the outcome of the race because of over officiating.
Yeah.
F1, wow, you've really taken the cake with being a joke of an officiating series. That's really bad. Shame on you.
It is. It's sad because I mean these are supposed to be some of the best open wheel drivers in the world, and they're going out there and they're putting their rules and ruining the outcomes of the races. But you know, thankfully we didn't have to worry about that in the K&N race, which was at Colorado. Um, I want to say it's Colorado Raceway,
National Speedway or something like that.
something like that. Some short track in the middle of the states, and you go out there. They don't have very good lighting, but they're night racing, and I watched the video of it. So you've got up and comers, teammates, two really competitive drivers, Haley Deegan and Derek Kraus, and they both drive for the same team. So they both got the same equipment, and it's the end of the race. And Haley has been leading pretty much the entire race. She's been dominating. She's been leading for the good majority of the race. And then they're getting down to it. So they got I don't know if it was a green white checker or not, but they're coming down to it. They got like 3 or 2 laps to go. They get the restart, and Derek Kraus he sends it. He wasn't even in the front row on the restart. He sends it in the corner. He pushes up into Haley, who pushes up into the 6th car. They're 3 wide for the lead. Derek's just absolutely leaning on Haley, and he's able to take the lead that way. So now they're coming down to it, and Haley's she's got an attitude on her now. She said it in an ARCA race a couple of weeks ago where she's not taking crap from nobody anymore. So she goes into the corner on the last turn, and she sends it in there just like Kraus sent it in at the beginning of the end of the race. And unfortunately, that resulted in contact that spun Derek Kraus out. And instead of them getting a 1-2 finish for their team, only Haley got to celebrate. Derek ended up with a pretty rough finish. I'm trying to pull it up here. Let's see here. He ended up with a 8th place finish, which was there were only 9 cars on lead lap and 14 cars who raced. So
Wow. I definitely saw the replay. I think it's one of those things where you give one, you get one back. Haley Deegan's definitely becoming the exception to this whole women can't drive thing. She's really showing that she's in good equipment, obviously, but she's showing that she can run with the boys. I mean, golly, she's only 17 years old and she's winning races. She's already won 2 races this year. I have no issue with the I guess the wreck, I guess we can call it, because if Haley Deegan doesn't save it, she doesn't get to make the opportunity to pass. So I thought it was fine. Basically, you give one, you get one. I know a lot of people were saying that's not racing and whatnot, but I mean that's short track racing at its finest. That's what you expect. You expect someone to push someone out of the way, and it was probably a little bit more aggressive than what Kraus did, just because it wasn't off a restart. It was definitely like a last second maneuver for both of them. So I mean, I'm fine with it. I think she needs to do that. I mean, it's short track racing. I think if you're on the side of Kraus, you think it's a bad move. I think if you're on the side of Deegan, you think it's a good move. And I think if you're on the side of short track racing and knowing what it's all about, that's what you want to see. You want to see good racing, but you want to see really hard racing and bumping and banging. And it's I thought it was fine. I mean, I think she has one coming, and I think she knows she has one coming.
I
But
agree.
I think she knows that she can just dish it right back, and Derek Kraus knows that, so he's got to think about that. It's like the whole Truex saying, "You won the battle, but you didn't. You ain't going to win the damn war to Logano." But guess who won the war? It was Logano. So we'll see how this inside. They're both teammates. I mean, they're teammates to each other. So we'll see how that transpires throughout the year. I mean, there's not a whole lot of K&N drivers these days. There's only about 10 or 11, 12 cars. I think he said 14. There's not a lot of cars anymore in the K&N series, so we'll see how this transpires throughout the year. Both of them are going to be competing for wins the rest of the season, so we'll see how it works out.
But yeah, that's pretty much what it's been. In the 5 races, both of them do have 2 wins. This is in the K&N West series, by the way. So, they're pretty much going toe for toe right now in this series, and I'm sure Kraus isn't going to let this one go. He's definitely been very vocal about it over social media. And so is Haley. She's been very vocal about it too. She's saying that she has no regrets over it whatsoever. And Derek's like, well, that's crap. So I'm interested to see how it turns out. But I'm also sitting here thinking, would we even be talking about a K&N Pro Series incident if a woman driver wasn't involved?
No,
Like,
I know we won't. We wouldn't have been for sure.
that's just in my eyes, that's something healthy. That means that we have a competent driver, who is a minority, as far as you got all these men that are racing, and now you've got a woman that's coming up. So and people are talking about her, and she's young and she's winning races. That's good. And people are gonna argue over this. This isn't, me and Kevin agree, but
This isn't over.
It's not like everybody else agrees, and there are definitely people out there that think that she drove over her head, and she shouldn't have done that because it's a teammate, and she should lose her ride. There are people out there that think like that. So everybody's entitled to their opinion on all that stuff. Gosh, in our, what do we got? An hour 22 here, and we haven't asked anybody a question. And honestly, we didn't get a lot of response for our last week's question, which I don't remember at this point. So we won't have a question this week. We'll talk with you guys through social media, and maybe we'll be a little bit more since this episode really wasn't that great, honestly.
We're both tired, and it was a long day for both of us. We do have full-time jobs, so bear with us. We appreciate all the support through the growing pains of this, and maybe in a year we'll be much more refined. So we hope you stick around through the muddy beginnings. But like I said, we do appreciate any and all views on these videos and this podcast. So, but I think that's definitely a good way to wrap up. What a weekend of some boring, some really exciting, some really controversial. We got next week. We got Iowa. It's one of my favorite tracks that NASCAR goes to. Got an off week for Cup, so I think it'll be a good week next weekend.
I'm looking forward to the Xfinity taking the spotlight, just because they deserve it every once in a while. You're not going to see, I don't think you're going to see any Cup drivers in it, so you're going to see guys like probably Justin Allgaier and Christopher Bell, and you'll see Tyler Reddick up there as well, and Cole Custer. You'll see, and the only reason I bring up Justin Allgaier with the other 3 is because Allgaier has been like the dominant guy at Iowa lately. So I'm looking forward to that in the Xfinity series, and the trucks will be there too, and we'll see how that triple truck challenge goes. But not, like I said, not our greatest episode, but we are getting there, and We're not gonna stop doing this. So thank you everybody for listening to us, and we'll get some fan engagement going throughout the week on social media. Follow us on our Facebook page, For the Fans. Follow us on our Twitter at For the Fans PC. You could also follow our YouTube channel, For the Fans Podcast, and anything else. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Google Play Music, and we're on Spotify as well. So definitely give us a like, and we'll talk with you through the week, and we'll get some feedback. We are going into an off week for Cup, so next weekend's episode we're probably going to focus on some important topics. So we'll try to get that going, and try to get some of your engagement before we even get to that episode. So you got anything else, Kev?
I am ready to shut it down. I am one tired puppy.
Yeah, I'm ready to go to bed as well. My bed's looking at me and saying, "Come over here." So I'm gonna head over that way. For Kevin, I'm Justin, and have a good night, everybody.
Good night.